Waking up tomorrow and every clock in the world is gone. No phone screen telling you it's 7:42 a.m., no wall clock ticking in the kitchen, no alarm dragging you out of bed. How would you know when to eat, when to work, when to sleep, when to live? Here's the wild part. Humans functioned like this for over 190,000 years. Clocks, as we know them, are barely 700 years old. So for nearly all of human history, people had no numbers to check, no ticking hands to glance at, and yet they built empires, planted crops on schedule, and even executed precise religious rituals down to the hour. So how on earth did they do it? Stick around because the answer is stranger and more brilliant than you'd think. Time isn't something we invented. It's something we discovered we needed to measure. Early humans didn't need precision. They needed rhythm. When to hunt, when to gather, when it was safe to move, and when it wasn't. But as societies grew, as farming, trade, religion, and government took shape, vague rhythm wasn't enough anymore. Farmers needed to know exactly when to plant before a flood season. Priests needed to perform rituals at precise sacred moments. Merchants needed to coordinate trade across cities. A civilization can't function on sometime around sunrise. It needs structure. And that's the real problem ancient people faced. How do you divide something invisible, something you can't hold, see, or touch, into pieces small and reliable enough to organize an entire society around? Before mechanical clocks, people didn't ignore time. They read it, almost like a language written across the sky and the land. The sun was the first and most trusted clock. Ancient Egyptians, as far back as 1500 BCE, used shadow clocks, essentially a stick or obelisk casting a shadow that moved predictably through the day. Watch where the shadow falls, and you knew roughly what hour it was. At night, the sun was useless, so people turned to the stars. Egyptian priests tracked specific star patterns rising at set intervals to divide the night into hours, which is actually where our 24-hour system traces its roots. Then there was water. The water clock, or clepsydra, dripped water at a steady rate from one container to another. No sunlight required. Rain or shine, day or night. Ancient Greece, China, and Persia all developed their own versions. Fire told time too. Some cultures burned graduated candles or ropes with knots tied at intervals. When the flame reached a knot, a set amount of time had passed. And then there was the most personal clock of all, the human body. Farmers rose with roosters. Monks prayed at set intervals marked by bells rung according to sun position. Entire communities functioned around shared natural cues. Sunrise, high noon, sunset, moonrise, without a single number in sight. It wasn't imprecise chaos. It was a completely different relationship with time, one tied to nature, not machines. So what pushed humanity from watching shadows to building machines? Religion, surprisingly, was one of the biggest drivers. Medieval European monasteries needed to pray at exact hours, 7 times a day, even in darkness or bad weather when sun and shadow clocks were useless. Monks needed something mechanical and reliable. Around the late 1200s in Europe, the first mechanical clocks began appearing in monasteries and cathedral towers. These weren't portable. They were massive, weight-driven machines using a mechanism called an escapement, which released energy in small, controlled ticks, instead of letting it all spill out at once. That single invention, the escapement, is arguably one of the most important mechanical breakthroughs in human history. Then came the second trigger, trade and cities. As towns grew, merchants, workers, and officials needed a shared public schedule. Church and town clock towers began ringing bells not just for prayer, but for market hours, curfews, and work shifts. For the first time, entire towns operated on the same invisible schedule. By the 1500s, spring-driven clocks made timepieces smaller, eventually small enough to wear. Time went from something read in nature to something owned, personally, on your wrist. This shift didn't just give us wristwatches. It rewired human civilization. The mechanical clock made the Industrial Revolution possible. Factories couldn't run on whenever the sun feels right. They needed workers clocking in and out at precise, identical hours. Punctuality became a virtue. Lateness became a moral failure. That pressure to be on time that still stresses people out today, it's a direct descendant of 700-year-old church bells. Clocks even changed how humans think. Before mechanical time, people thought in terms of tasks. After the harvest, before nightfall, after clocks, people began thinking in terms of units, minutes, hours, deadlines. It fundamentally shifted human psychology toward measuring life in fixed slices instead of natural flow. And globally, this eventually led to time zones, standardized schedules, GPS satellites that sync atomic clocks accurate to a billionth of a second, and the world you live in right now, where a meeting in Tokyo and a meeting in New York can be scheduled down to the exact minute. Every notification, every train schedule, every see you at 3 p.m., all of it traces back to a monk trying to wake up for prayer in the dark. Here's one final fact that puts it all in perspective. The word clock itself comes from the medieval Latin word clocca, meaning bell. The earliest mechanical clocks didn't even have faces or hands. They only rang bells to mark the hour. The visual clock face, the one we all picture in our heads, was actually invented after the clock itself, just so people watching it ring could finally see why. So the next time you glance at your phone to check the time, remember, you're not just reading numbers. You're looking at the final result of a 5,000-year-old human obsession, the desire to catch something invisible and finally hold it still.